A low mist clung to the dirt of a remote Virginia range that morning, the quiet broken only by scattered voices and the metallic snap of gear being prepped. Out of the calm stepped a man dressed in nothing remarkable, just a faded jacket and jeans, the kind of look that made most folks glance past him. But that first impression wouldn't last long. His rifle, a battered old bolt-action, drew immediate snickers, not from everyone, but loud enough. A former Marine, puffed up and flanked by a group of eager spectators, made sure the teasing landed hard. He joked about museums and antique collections. The laughter caught on fast, bouncing off the concrete like stray rounds. Yet when the long steel gong at 800 yards rang out from a single, almost lazy shot, sharp, perfect, final, the air changed. Suddenly no one felt like laughing. They didn't know what that quiet man carried in his history. They hadn't seen his years in the shadows, the missions he'd completed without recognition, the lives he'd taken not for glory, but for duty, and today, without warning or fanfare, they were going to witness what that kind of experience looked like when it breathed through a rifle barrel. So before we go deeper into what unfolded that day, let us know where you're watching from, and if loyalty, discipline, and sacrifice still strike a chord, stay with us, because this is about remembering. That particular October morning had that Shenandoah stillness, the hills slowly waking, the air thick with earth, cordite, and diesel. Shenandoah Range Club was no polished facility. It had the look of something built during wartime and barely touched since. Tin roofs, wooden benches, dirt lanes marked only by years of boot prints. It was a place where men came to test themselves, not to pose. The vehicles outside said enough. No shine, no gloss, trucks streaked with mud, beat-up Jeeps, and dusty old sedans. The kind of place where a reputation earned on screen wouldn't mean half as much as a clean grouping at 600 yards. That's when Ethan Cole arrived. His car didn't roar. It hummed, a decades-old Ford easing into its place like it belonged there. He stepped out without fanfare, mid-30s, lean but strong. His movements had that tired efficiency only found in soldiers who'd done more than they'd ever admit. His canvas bag was older than some of the shooters present, and his presence wasn't loud, but it had gravity. He walked to the logbook, scribbled his name with barely a glance, then took the last lane, number 10, farthest from the noise. Round him, shooters busied themselves with their precision tools, rifles gleaming with polished rails, digital scopes, monogrammed cheek rests. They handled them like ornaments, delicate and expensive. Ethan, meanwhile, unzipped his bag with the same care someone might use to unwrap a keepsake. What he pulled out made several heads snap around. The M1903 Springfield. Original, faded, lived in. It had stories carved into the very grain of the wood. He moved with quiet reverence, checking the bolt with fingers that knew its resistance, and weight by heart. It wasn't showy. It was intimate. And then the energy shifted. A truck, big, black, oversized, growled into the lot. Gravel scattered under its tires like it was announcing something. Out leapt Jake Ramsey, Marine Corps. Ink still fresh, body built for the camera, and a personality to match. He carried himself like a walking highlight reel, GoPro ready and loud. He tossed his gear down with flair, unzipped the high-end rifle case, and flashed a grin that belonged on a thumbnail. Let's show these boys how it's done. He boomed, projecting like a man used to being mic'd up. His rifle was all shine and modern muscle, custom M4. Accessories crowding every inch. Flash suppressor, electronic scope, bipod with carbon legs. The crowd, young men in branded hats and range-ready pants, drifted toward him, half listening and half-dashed filming. Jake scanned the benches, then spotted Ethan down the line. Well, look at that, he said loud enough for everyone, pointing. Somebody dusted off a museum piece. They give that to you when you retired from reenactments, or do you just polish it for fun? Laughter, easy, unkind. A few snorts. Someone muttered, he probably brought it just to feel important. Ethan didn't respond, just sat still, eyes watching the flags flutter in the wind. One hand warming around a tin coffee mug. Jake pressed on. Come on, man. You one of those fancy ceremonial types, pose in front of graves, don't even load the thing? Or does the army just keep you around to scare pigeons off monuments? This time, the comments drew bolder laughter. Not far off, a figure stirred. Frank Dawson, retired colonel, eyes like old steel, leaned against a post, watching. He'd seen this dance before. Men who made noise, and men who didn't need to. Jake started his show. The M4 controlled fire, round slamming steel at 300 yards with a rhythmic ping. He narrated like he was streaming. Wind's light. Nothing this baby can't handle. Top-end glass. Mil-spec barrel, this thing practically shoots itself. He made a show of working the bolt loud, exaggerated. Makes a difference when you've been in real combat. He called. Not just holding still for parades. Lane 10 remained quiet. Jake called again, this time half laughing. Hey, Monument Man, you ever plan on firing that antique, or just here to dust it off and whisper to it? More snickers. A couple of the younger guys glanced toward Ethan, waiting to see if he'd crack. He did in single quotes T-die instead. He leaned forward slow. Deliberate hand placed the butt of his rifle against his shoulder. One round clicked into place. He adjusted his sling, adjusted his breathing. One slow inhale, one exhale, and when that shot came, it wasn't dramatic. It was clean. The steel target at 800 yards didn't just ring, it sang, high and sharp like a bell that had been waiting to be struck by someone who truly understood it. No commentary followed. No raised voice, no grin. But in the silence that followed, every eye on the range slowly turned toward Lane 10, and every joke that had been made just a minute before suddenly felt small. Asterisk. Frank Dawson didn't find it funny. He shut his rifle case with a quiet, deliberate click, leaned back in his chair, and folded his arms. His eyes locked on Ethan, not with anger, but with a wary focus, like someone sensing a storm before it breaks. He'd seen this kind of thing before, a brash show-off picking the wrong guy to tease. It never ended the way the loud one expected. Ethan finally lifted his gaze. He didn't look offended, just faintly curious, as if someone had spoken to him in a language he didn't quite recognize. I'm not here to prove anything, he said, calm and level, his voice smooth like it had spent years speaking only when it mattered. Jake grinned, thinking he'd found a weakness. Come on, man, just one shot, same target. I'll stay in the shadows. Show us what you learned babysitting graves. One bullet. Let's see if that parade ground training's good for anything. Real. Ethan didn't react. He sipped his coffee, eyes still following the motion of the flags in the wind. His silence only pushed Jake further. The small crowd that had gathered began to lose interest, some wandering off to check their own gear or reload. Jake noticed and raised his voice, desperate to hold on to their attention. Fine, I'll even spot you. Use my scope if you want. That dinosaur you brought probably can't see past 50 yards. Ethan didn't even blink. Frank Dawson got up, walking forward with the easy pace of a man used to tension. But there was a stiffness in his shoulders, the kind that comes from experience telling you trouble's ahead. Jake kept pushing, lifting his emperor with mock pride. Yeah, I get it. Standing still all day in that uniform has to be exhausting. But they must teach you to shoot between the marching drills, right? That was when Ethan rose. He placed his thermos down gently, stood with the kind of unhurried confidence you couldn't fake, and opened the chamber of his rifle. Every movement was efficient, smooth, as if rehearsed 1,000 times. One shot, he said. 800 yards. No optics. The range quieted. Not the usual pause. This was deeper. Like a breath held before a verdict. Everyone turned to watch. Jake scoffed, shaking his head. With that old bolt action at that distance? You can't even see the target without a scope. Ethan didn't reply. He lay down with practiced ease, the way a craftsman settles into his work. There was no flash, no posing, just the simplicity of a man completely in tune with his weapon. The M1903 tucked into his shoulder like it had always belonged there. The flags shifted in the wind again. Ethan watched them, then went still. The range officer, an older man with tired eyes and faded tattoos, spoke into the quiet. Steel. Silhouette. 800 yards. Shooter ready. No response from Ethan. He didn't need to confirm. His breathing slowed, so even and steady it was barely noticeable. Jake leaned toward a friend and muttered, "This is gonna be a joke. Nobody hits that cold with irons." But Frank Dawson wasn't paying Jake any attention anymore. His eyes were fixed on Ethan now, and his expression had changed, no longer curious, but almost solemn. He'd seen that stillness before. He knew what it meant. Ethan exhaled. The rifle barked once sharp and crisp, without echo. Then the metallic chime of impact rang across the range. A clean hit. Nobody moved. It was as if the world had been paused. The kind of silence that demands you pay attention. The range officer lifted his binoculars, checked, then announced without fanfare. Hit confirmed. Center of mass. Iron sights. 800 yards. Ethan stood with the same effortless calm, cleared the chamber, and sat back down. He poured another cup of coffee, as if nothing unusual had happened. Ethan finished the last sip of his coffee, rinsed the cup with a bit of water from his thermos, and set it aside. Then, with practiced ease, he began taking apart his M1903 rifle. Every motion was calm, exact, as if he were following a ritual one born not of habit, but of respect. This wasn't just a weapon to him, it was a tool that had once stood between him and death. Carefully, he wiped down each part and stowed it in an old, faded canvas bag. A boy, maybe 19 at most, hesitated near the edge of the bench before stepping closer. His expression was one of awe, the wide-eyed kind you see when someone realizes they've just seen something extraordinary. Double quote, sir. He said quietly, his voice reverent. That was amazing. That's a World War I rifle, right? The Springfield M1903? How do you hit something that far out without a scope? Ethan looked up, calm but assessing. You don't just aim, he said. You pay attention to the wind. Know your bullet's trajectory, measure the distance. Eventually, it becomes instinct like tying your boots. He paused before adding, training helps. So does having the kind of experiences where missing isn't an option? The young man gave a slow nod. My dad used to talk about the tomb guards, said they were something else. I think I get what he meant now. Ethan gave a slight nod in return. It's not about how the uniform looks. It's about what it stands for. By now, a few others had gathered nearby, drawn less by the shot itself and more by the weight that had settled afterward. The mood had shifted, less casual, more respectful. This wasn't showmanship. It was something deeper. A man with silver hair and a Shenandoah Range Club patch on his sleeve spoke up. Mind if I ask where you served, sir? 75th Rangers, Ethan replied. Worked with recon teams. These days, I'm with the 3rd Infantry Regiment. I'm posted at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. That caught attention. Frank Dawson, a former colonel with the 82nd Airborne, stepped forward. I served in Desert Storm in Afghanistan. I knew I'd seen that kind of discipline before. He turned toward the others, his tone firm but respectful. Most folks here don't realize what they just saw, do they? Ethan simply shrugged. Just a single round. Frank let out a short, dry laugh. Sure. One shot. Cold bore. No optics. 800 yards. And wind like that. Out there. That's the difference between coming home and not. Between success and a folded flag at someone's funeral. No one spoke for a moment. The air had grown heavier now from tension, but understanding. This wasn't just about marksmanship. It was about everything behind it. Off to the side. Jake, the guy who'd made jokes earlier, stood at his bench, his M4 partially disassembled in front of him. His expression had shifted. The smugness was gone. There was something like shame in his eyes. He approached slowly. Look, he began, his voice low. I didn't know who you were. The stuff I said about the ceremonial guard, it was disrespectful. Ethan looked up, his face unreadable. You saw the uniform. You made an assumption. Happens all the time. His tone was level. He wasn't angry, but there was no forgiveness in it either, just plain honesty. Jake shifted awkwardly. You really chose to serve at the tomb, after all that combat time. It's not a downgrade, Ethan said. It's a privilege. Most of us who guard the tomb came from combat units, Rangers, infantry, Marines. What people see during the changing of the guard, that's just the surface. We didn't stop being soldiers. Frank nodded, arms crossed. That job isn't just about drills or fancy uniforms. It's one of the highest responsibilities in the military. You don't carry live rounds on that sacred ground unless someone trusts you to represent every fallen soldier with the weight they deserve. The group went quiet. The true meaning of guarding the tomb had settled in. It wasn't about ceremony, it was about duty, about honor carried in silence. Every minute of every day. Asterisk each fallen warrior who never came back, each name carved into the stone at Arlington spoke of sacrifice. The younger shooters, loud and carefree just moments earlier, stood in silence now. The laughter had vanished, replaced by an uneasy stillness, as if something invisible had settled over the range. Their confidence had crumbled like dry leaves crushed underfoot. A boy in a camo ball cap finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. So, when you're guarding the tomb, you're still active duty. Ethan, calm and methodical, was wrapping up. His rifle was packed with care, every movement deliberate, still on mission. He said, only difference is, there's more people watching. The atmosphere had shifted completely. The usual friendly rivalry had faded, replaced by a heavier, more reverent tone. Gear was packed without chatter. Even Jake, who'd been the loudest, seemed lost and thought his bravado dissolved in the face of something real. Ethan secured the final strap on his rifle case, slung it over his shoulder, and gave a respectful nod. "Gentlemen," he turned to leave, but Frank called out after him, "Ethan, that shot what was the actual range?" Ethan paused mid-step, looked back over his shoulder. 820, give or take. The wind was playing tricks, but the target was marked at 800, Frank said. Brow furrowed. Ethan offered a slight shrug. "Close enough. I don't shoot by the numbers. I shoot by feel." And with that, he walked off, his boots crunching the gravel path, the M1903 riding his shoulder like it belonged there, like it always had. Behind him, the range fell into a thoughtful quiet, not the kind before a match, but the silence that follows a moment of clarity, one that lingers. At his car, Ethan opened the trunk and laid the rifle case inside, each movement slow and intentional. There was no need to rush. Precision wasn't something you turn off. He was reaching for the driver's door when the young man came jogging up again, still clearly processing the moment. "Sir," he asked, "thanks for the shot, for telling us about the tomb guard. I had no idea." Ethan gave him a small nod. "You don't have to thank me. Just don't forget it. Next time you see someone standing post in dress blues, know there's more to it than ceremony." The kid hesitated, then added, "My dad used to say that too. He was with the 101st. Said the ones who stay quiet, those are the ones you should really notice." Ethan's face softened for a moment. "Sounds like your father understood a few things." As the kid turned back toward the clubhouse, others on the range looked on not with judgment or curiosity, but with something else, a quiet, wordless respect, the kind you give someone who's earned it without asking. Frank stood outside the office, a cigarette dangling from his fingers, watching Ethan go with a faint nod of approval, without applause. A few others leaned against their trucks, speaking. In hushed voices, their tone had changed. Something important had settled into their bones. All from one calm man, one old rifle, and one unforgettable shot. Jake remained at his bench, quietly tending to his M4. His hands moved with care, but his mind seemed far away, turning over more than just cleaning steps. Something had shifted. Ethan got into his car, started the engine, and eased out of the lot. The Virginia hills stretched before him, bathed in the warm hues of late afternoon. A hawk traced lazy circles in the sky above, and the low, steady hum of a distant tractor drifted in through the open window piece, the kind that only resonates after you've stood in places where peace is a distant dream. His destination, Arlington. Tomorrow, he put on the deep blue uniform again, clip on the badge he'd earned through years of training, hardship, and silent endurance. He would take his position by the tomb of the unknown soldier, where cameras would click and voices would hush in curiosity. They'd see a motionless figure, a symbol, but they wouldn't know the man behind the stillness, one who had honed his aim in places where every shot mattered, not for scorecards, but for survival. Back at Shenandoah, the range fell quiet as the sun dipped lower. People packed their gear, their conversations subdued, thoughtful. They had come looking for competition, fun, maybe even bragging rights. But they were leaving with something else, a lesson in respect, in restraint, in understanding that real skill often walks in quietly, without applause. Tomorrow, the range would host new visitors, fresh challenges, more bullets cutting through the air. But today stood apart. Today, they witnessed what it means to serve with quiet dignity, to embody the values of discipline, precision, and humility without ever having to say a word. Ethan's thoughts drifted as the road curved toward the cemetery. He reflected not on the shot he'd taken, but on what it represented. Sometimes, all it takes is one round to shift an entire room's perspective, and maybe that's the point. The quiet ones, the ones who don't seek attention, are often the ones who've endured the most. True duty isn't about medals or recognition. It's about consistency, showing up, doing what needs to be done, even when no one's watching. So, the next time you see a guard at their post, whether it's in Arlington or anywhere else, boss, think of Ethan Cole. Think of the burden resting in their hands, the history woven into their steps, the discipline forged through years of silent service. And remember, the strongest among us don't need to declare it. They're simply there, ready when it counts. Asterisk, asterisk.